This is All India Radio. In the program Spotlight, now we bring you a discussion on Operation Ganga and developments in Ukraine. The participants are Commodore Retired C. Uday Bhaskar, Strategic Analyst, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, Journalist.
Commodore Uday Bhaskar, India began the evacuation of its citizens from Romania and Hungary on Saturday. So India on Monday said it managed to accelerate efforts to evacuate its nationals from various border crossings along the border of Ukraine with Romania, Hungary, Poland and Slovakia. And we have also tried to open a route from Moldova to bring back some Indians to Romania and then to India. So how do you see the overall evacuation mission christened Operation Ganga? And in the midst of India's efforts to expand the evacuation mission, we received this news of an Indian student getting killed in selling in the Ukrainian city of Kharkiv. So how do you see India's overall approach in reaching out to the Indians stuck in various Ukrainian cities after the Russian aggression of Ukraine, and the overall government India strategy under the Operation Ganga to bring back the Indians stranded in that country?
At the outset, I would like to offer condolences. It's very tragic that an Indian student has been killed in the current hostilities that we see in Ukraine, and all the other students who are currently, and I would say Indian citizens who are currently stranded in that country. I think the entire Indian collective is supporting their swift return to India in a safe and stable manner. And I think towards that end, the effort of the government, which has now been called Operation Ganga, is to be welcomed. Because in any conflict situation, the first priority of the government is to ensure the safety and security of its citizens. And the Modi government is to be commended for making this effort on this scale. Because if you recall, in the past, there have been situations both during the COVID and earlier, for instance, during the war in Lebanon in 2006. India had mounted operations to bring back stranded citizens. But this time, if you look at the way in which the government has tried to reach out to the citizens, 4 cabinet ministers have been deputed to ensure coordination. And we are already seeing on social media the images and the messages that are coming, which in a way, I think because of the connectivity that social media now provides, it would be a kind of assurance to these largely young Indian students who are stranded in some very dangerous places. I know personally that some of them have been reaching out to our friends to indicate their current plight. So my response is to extend the solidarity to those Indian citizens who are stranded in Ukraine and to let them know through whatever medium of communication that reaches them that the government is making a very concerted effort, and we already have a number of aircraft that are ferrying these passengers. And I think the fact that the government has also indicated that they would be able to extend this help to those people from other countries in the neighborhood who are stranded is also to be commended. And one hopes that all of them reach safety in the shortest time frame.
Commodore Uday Bhaskar, the Prime Minister has been holding regular meetings in the last few days. On Monday, he held 2 meetings with senior ministers and top officials, asking them to expedite the evacuation process and also announcing humanitarian assistance to the bordering areas witnessing massive influx of people in an attempt to cross over to the neighboring countries of Romania, Hungary, Poland and Slovak Republic. So Prime Minister in the second meeting on Monday, he very categorically said that the entire government machinery is working round the clock to ensure that all Indian nationals in Ukraine are safe and secure. This was said in a press release also by the Ministry of External Affairs. And as you said that Prime Minister instructed 4 senior ministers, designating them as his special envoys to various nations to energize the evacuation efforts. But considering the current situation, particularly in the conflict zones, even if India has been mounting a major diplomatic offensive effort reaching out to the Ukrainian side, Prime Minister Modi spoke to the Ukrainian President, External Affairs Minister spoke to the Ukrainian Foreign Minister, Foreign Secretary has been in touch with the Ukrainian Ambassador in Delhi. At the same time, Prime Minister also spoke to Russian President Vladimir Putin. Our Foreign Minister spoke to the Russian counterpart, Mr. Lavrov. And the foreign ministry mandarins are also in touch with the Russian embassy in Delhi as part of the whole of the government effort. Still, in fact, some of our citizens are stuck. In this kind of a situation, Commodore Uday Bhaskar, what should be the way out? How to just take out our citizens from the conflict zones?
The scale of the problem at this point is quite daunting because Ukraine has been providing both employment and education to a large number of foreign citizens. And I understand that the Indian estimate is between 20,000 to 30,000 who are currently in Ukraine, both as students and as people working in other sectors of the Ukrainian economy. So you will get an idea that if a country like India has about 30,000 people, there are many other nationalities, particularly from Africa and Asia, as also those from Europe, who are not Ukrainians but who are either studying or working in that country. And some estimates have put this number as almost at 250,000. Many of them are people who are also in transit, who are moving, so this number could be imprecise. But I think the immediate priority for all countries whose citizens are in Ukraine is to ensure that they are able to move westwards towards one of the bordering countries from where evacuation is being planned. Every country has its own logistic arrangements. So in the Indian case, I think today we have also seen the Prime Minister suggesting that the Indian Air Force would be brought to provide necessary assistance, along with some of the commercial airlines. So I think on one hand, we need to have a sense of the numbers and which are the countries they would be directed towards, because it also depends on connectivity within Ukraine, which is now completely disrupted. So those Indians who are closer to the Russian border may find it more difficult, that is on the eastern side of Ukraine, where the exits are not as appropriate as they ought to be. And currently there are certain constraints in terms of the ability to operate aircraft in a safe manner. So I think day by day we will have to get an estimate, and every evacuation is preceded by very detailed planning that the Ministry of External Affairs has done in the past. You will remember, for instance, when we had the first war in Iraq for Kuwait, we are talking about January 1991. Again, there was a massive lift and planning operation that had been conducted at that time, where the numbers were also in hundreds of thousands. So similarly, I think the planning process will have to be done in a very meticulous and careful way against the backdrop of a kinetic situation where there is violence and bloodshed. And I think the monitoring will have to be done literally in 12-hour cycles, and the government has set up these control rooms. And again, I repeat that India is not alone. We have seen reports of students, for instance, from African countries also being treated in a rather, shall we say, shabby manner because of a number of factors. And these are the kind of things that would have to be addressed in a very objective manner at this point. I think emotive responses would be counterproductive. And we should also acknowledge the role being played by the neighboring countries and their NGOs in providing whatever support they can. And all this is based on the social media trickle that we are all following. So my own, as I said, overall assessment is that this is a very complex and difficult situation. But I think we should be gratified that the government is giving it the highest attention. And the fact that cabinet ministers have also been pressed into service is indicative, I think, knowing fully well that for every operation, there are many uncertainties. And we have to see, I think, in 12-hour cycles, how many Indians have come back to safety. And I earnestly hope that India would also be able to bring the citizens of other neighboring countries. And this would be in keeping with what the Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, had said. And the Ministry of External Affairs had also issued a statement, and I'm quoting from that, quote, guided by India's motto of the world being one family, Prime Minister Narendra Modi stated that India will help people from neighboring countries and developing countries stranded in Ukraine, unquote. So I do hope that we would be able to carry out this support for the other nationalities also.
Commodore Uday Bhaskar, also in the meeting the Prime Minister held yesterday, during the second meeting, it was also decided to send humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. So how do you see this move when India has been maintaining the position that hostilities should immediately end, there should be respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity by all the states? in an indication that whatever Russia has been doing is not acceptable to India. It's a nuanced change of position to what we have said at the UNC on February 17th, February 21st, and February 23rd. But during the vote on UNSC resolution on the Ukraine crisis, India made it very clear that sovereignty and territorial integrity of the states must be respected. And flowing from that decision and the decision of yesterday to send humanitarian assistance to Ukraine to deal with the massive influx of refugees towards the neighboring countries. The people who are trying to exit Ukraine are crowding around the exit points, and there is a humanitarian crisis. In that kind of a situation, India deciding to send medical supplies, relief materials to help Ukraine deal with the situation along the border. So how do you see this decision by India?
No, this is a decision that again should be welcomed, because whenever there has been a humanitarian crisis of this scale, to the extent possible, India has provided necessary support, humanitarian and otherwise. Afghanistan, which is closer to us, is case in point. Now, you are aware that India had offered to provide assistance to Afghanistan, and only now, after a lot of bottlenecks were cleared, that aid is reaching the people, hapless citizens of Afghanistan. So in similar manner, the Ukraine crisis now has got a huge humanitarian dimension, as we can see. And we understand that the Indian Foreign Secretary, Mr. Shringla, has already been in touch with the Ukrainian ambassador, Mr. Igor Olikha. And there has been some consultation about India providing humanitarian aid. How this will reach is, of course, I think a matter of detail. But there is no doubt in my mind that humanitarian aid is the need of the hour from every country and every institution which can provide it, for all those, irrespective of nationality, who are now stranded, because we are talking about basic things like food and water, medicines, shelter. This is the nature of any war, big or small, that in the first phase, the civilian population is completely convulsed. You know, the kind of disruptions that take place, particularly for the young, for the vulnerable, for the old, for everyone, irrespective of age and gender. And I think it is in that sense that the call for humanitarian aid is something that the global community should be able to respond to when there are all forms of communication which technology now enables, and medicines, critical kind of supply issues, which I'm sure the Ukrainian government has already been seeking. I've seen some requests of this nature on social media and on other platforms. And to the extent possible, neighboring countries are already supporting. But I think the scale is such that there has to be a plan again over the next week, over the next 2 weeks, till as the situation stabilizes. And I think India should also be part of that effort, because we have the kind of capacity that perhaps some of the smaller nations do not have. Concurrently, I've often maintained that there should be an appeal to the citizens of India also. We could have a Ukraine fund, and the government's own efforts could be complemented. And as always, we have seen that the Indian citizen has been very forthcoming, whether it's a flood or an earthquake or whenever there has been any kind of exigency where immediate humanitarian aid is called for. The citizen effort from civil society has been very, again, commendable. I hope that the Ukraine situation would elicit a similar response. It needs coordination. It needs a certain amount of organizing. It's a bit like saying that I'd like to support, but where should I send my money or my items? And this is the kind of effort I think we now need to consider, so that not only does this humanitarian aid reach the Indian citizens, but along with that, for all the others who are similarly, I would say, stranded. My sense again is that every aircraft that is now going would have this kind of immediate humanitarian and medical supplies on board to reach as many people as is possible. But again, I underline this point, the scale is quite daunting. So we will have to take this a day at a time. And the fact that one Indian student from Karnataka lost his life when he was standing in front of a grocery store in queue, as I read the news reports, is the tragic kind of reality of what is happening in Ukraine now.
Commander Uday Bhaskar, thank you so very much for your detailed perspective about India's evacuation mission, Operation Ganga, as well as subsequent offer of help to neighboring countries in evacuating their stranded citizens, as well as India's offer of humanitarian assistance to Ukraine. Thank you so very much.
You were listening to a discussion on Operation Ganga and developments in Ukraine. The participants were Commodore Retired C. Uday Bhaskar, Strategic Analyst, and Manas Pratim Bhuyan, Journalist. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of All India Radio. You can listen to it on our mobile app News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel News on AIR Official. You may email your opinion about this program at airnsttalks@gmail.com.